Hi guys, welcome to today's session. So this is going to be a little one-off. Sometimes I like to do lessons where I kind of cover my own process. So I tend to be a still life painter and I tend to work in miniature. So this little panel here you can sort of see compared to my thumb size, how small it is. And I've got these tiny brushes that I'm going to be using. So I've got these miniature brushes, you can usually get them sort of from craft shops. You can even get them, you use them for like model painting and stuff like that, it's quite common. So yeah, you want some tiny brushes, a sort of small surface to paint on, can be almost anything. You want it to be quite smooth, so this is quite a smooth surface that I'm working on. If it's textured, it's a bit trickier to get a lot of detail in. And I'm going to be working from this Magnolia reference, it's a photo reference that I took quite recently. And I'm going to be trying to fit it into this very tiny space. So it's just kind of an interesting kind of little change of tack for you guys if you want to do some miniature work. It's something I've been doing a lot recently myself, as I say. We're going to start, it's pretty much the same process of other workshops or other lessons that I've done on here with you guys. So we're going to be beginning with trying to figure out just a kind of general placement for the flower. So my starting point is this. So you sort of got the triangular shape for the flower there. In terms of colours, I'll be kind of mentioning the colours that I'm using as I'm working, and then I'll also put a little note at the bottom of the video as to what we used in the end. So at the moment I'm just using burnt umber with a bit of medium. So I'm just going through and kind of placing these petal shapes. I'm trying to do it quite lightly because it's Alla Prima, this piece, we're going to be working over it, so we're going to attempt to do everything just in this session. I mean, with an Alla Prima you can always go back to it, so like I could always go back and rework aspects of this. But our intention is to try to get everything in today. Now I'm just going to lay in this biggest petal. There's quite a lot of sort of what we would call lost and found edges as well, particularly among the lighter tones. But for now I am going to kind of try to separate out these petals. You guys probably have a better view of what I'm doing than I do because I've got the camera zoomed in. That's probably one of the trickier aspects of this kind of miniature work, is kind of using your eyes to see what's even going on. So I've got this other petal sticking out on the right hand side. I specifically chose this reference because there aren't too many petals to deal with. Sometimes with flowers you have a lot of petals, and working in miniature and trying to cope with a lot would be pretty tricky. So not limited to, we're not kind of having to deal with too many, but there are quite a few. Probably count them up once I put them in. So we've got our kind of little wash drawing blocked in now. So the next thing that I want to do is start to lay in. I'm going to do the lightest tones. You sort of do it differently depending on the piece, but want to start to get the kind of lightest parts of the painting in. There's a lot of kind of very bright white sort of around the top up here, top of those petals. And then they tend to shift like a little bit darker. So I'm just using pure white, and the kind of color shift comes from the fact that at times I lay it a little bit. So as I'm kind of going down here, I'm using less of it, laying it more thinly over the orange ground that I'm starting with. That orange ground as well, I shouldn't mention. It's just some acrylic ink over acrylic gesso, but I'm working in oils, which is generally considered alright to do. Like a thin acrylic wash over an acrylic base. That's what you're working with. So I'm almost done with the kind of pure white tones. Then I'm going to start mixing up some other kind of little interval colours. So just mix a little bit of burnt umber, the white, to a slightly darker colour, but I also want some alizarin crimson, I think we'll be using. Could use something like a cadmium red, but the alizarin crimson will give us a bit better, something closer to that kind of cool pinkiness down the bottom. I want to jump to the alizarin crimson now, before laying in those kind of in-between colours. So you can see how that's a nice kind of inky crimson almost. Just put some there. Then blending up in towards the white. We want that crimson to kind of make its way up that petal. There, so you can see, starting to get that sense of the form turning. So I'm still just using white, burnt umber, and that alizarin crimson. The burnt umber mixed with white looks pretty grey because everything else is so high chroma, so the background, that orangey background, is very saturated, very high chroma. Just going a bit more pure white, building up this lighter section again now a bit more. A little bit more of this alizarin crimson down into this shadowy dip. That's quite good. And I also want to blend a little bit of blending of the alizarin crimson on this petal up into that white, and probably blend the white back down into it as well, but we'll start this way. So while I wouldn't always like, let's say dabby with your brushwork, when you're working this small, you can sort of afford to be a bit dabbier. A little bit of this shadowy colour down the bottom. So just my dog tapping in the background there, being a pest. So that's those undertones sort of worked on. Maybe a little bit here as well, actually. Sort of cooler grey, almost kind of transparent colours here and there. Could do with actually this petal here going a little bit bluer, so I'm going to get some ivory, black and white, and that should make, that's maybe a little bit dark, but we're going for a slightly lighter colour of that mixed up. So just mixing a little bit more white gradually into that black mixture. And titanium white and ivory black, if you've watched other videos, often used as a sort of bluish colour. So you can see it feels a bit bluer, especially compared to the very warm colours around it. Picking up a little bit more just pure white again. So pure white's played an important role. Oh, actually, before I do that, I'm just going to get a little bit more of that cooler grey colour. I just want to fill in this little shadow tone in here. I'm hoping you guys can kind of follow what's going on. I think you can. As I say, I think you might actually have a slightly better view than me. You'll probably find when you're doing your own that you're surprised at how difficult it is to sort of follow what's going on when you're working this tiny. But it's an interesting challenge, as I say. Yes, that's not too bad, I think. And then, as I say, I'm going to go back to just pure white. Use this pure white to kind of edge some of these petals as well. However, we need some more bright highlights. Yeah, so that seems pretty good for those petals. This is probably going to end up being the longest video I've ever done on here. Going to get some more colours out now. So I've got cad yellow on my palette. I'm going to get some Prussian blue because we need something to paint in this green. Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a kind of like extra long bonus lesson, this one. Usually they're going to, if you haven't watched lots of them before, they're limited to sort of just about 20 minutes per lesson or so to make them a bit more bite-sized, but should be fine. Going a bit over on this one. We're also coming up to a holiday with the school, so keep you guys busy. So you've got this green I've mixed up using Prussian blue. And this is a sort of mid-tone. So this is Prussian blue and some cad yellow. And then I want to add some white to that. Kind of pale it out a bit. That seems pretty good. Yeah, it's not bad. It's a bit of a slightly darker green here as well. If you want to go for a darker green using this palette, burnt umber and Prussian blue is a good option. So there we've got a little bit of a start on our green. Actually, it's probably about as much as we'll do. So now I'm going to jump to pure burnt umber. A little bit of white mixed in. And we want to paint in the stem. And the stem's also going to have a sort of white highlight running through it too. Yes, I'm quite happy with that as the stem. So the final thing that I'll do, just going to check what time we're at. Yeah, slightly longer than usual. So the last thing is just going to be popping in a bit of a background tone. So on the reference, I've got this kind of like a sense of a shadow that kind of drops down below the flower, and maybe a little bit of a kind of shadow, slightly darker edge here for where the stem is. And I want to sort of paint that in around it. So for this, I'm just going to clean my brushes off, and it's going to be a simple little trompe. So this is the other thing I kind of work with in my paintings. There's a lot of trompe l'oeil. And we want to try to get it to feel like the flower is sort of popping off the surface. And so part of the way that we do that is we just take, so I'm going to just be using black and white for my background. Take some pretty much pure black. It's going to be our shadow color. And as I say, it's pretty dark kind of immediately behind the flower. You'll see a pretty big change as I lay this in. I might go a little bit quiet because what I'm going to be trying to do is just neatly get this background painted in around. So as I say, it kind of generally drops the shadow kind of here-ish. So just dropping below, and then that kind of connects to the sense of this stem casting a shadow as well, and they combine. So this is sort of our absolute darkest part of the shadow behind the flower. And then we're going to mix. A slightly lighter, pretty dark still, but slightly lighter grey. And kind of blend them together. Soften them out. So that's the sort of darkest tone behind the flower. Now what I'm going to do is just take a touch of white and mix up more of a kind of lightish grey. I'm going to use a slightly bigger brush as well, just to make sure I've got a reasonable amount of it. So yeah, this lighter, you can see that's just a touch lighter, that grey, probably just about make out. So I'm just going to paint that in, particularly sort of these bigger areas. Bigger being quite a relative word in terms of this painting, obviously. Yeah, so kind of like blocking it in. around the flower. I want to get, so this grey I'm going to kind of lay in as effective as I can over this top portion of the painting. This is going to be, because the fall of light is kind of coming from above, the background's going to be a bit lighter up here. And then I'm going to mix a slightly darker grey, and that's going to kind of take up the bottom portion of the background. But first I want to kind of fill in these gaps. Just mixing up it's a little bit too light, a slightly bigger pool of paint. It's always irritating when you just run out of paint. When I'm working on these sorts of backgrounds. And excuse my slightly stilted voice as well. That's just because I'm gonna have to hold my breath in when I'm trying to lay in these edges. I actually have a fairly shaky hand for someone who does miniatures, so I have to always make sure I sort of anchor my body, my hands resting against the easel quite a lot for these brush strokes. Something that would make this easier that I would probably do if I wasn't filming is actually if you just kind of like flip the painting around, and especially with these miniatures you can even hold them in your hands. I often do that. You're doing these sorts of details. Could be a good thing to do. Just about there. It's going to get a little bit, it should get a little bit easier once I get past these petals. There we go. Yes, so So yeah, I've just got these darker tones now, so slightly darker grey, not black. And then what we're going to try to do is blend that into the rest of the background, and then that's going to create this effect that the flower is kind of like hovering or popping off the surface of the panel. And it's a very simple trompe-l'oeil trick, but works well. One of the oldest trompe-l'oeil tricks in the book. Yeah, there we go. So now I'm just going to try to blend out this darker shadow behind a bit. Now I've just got a bit more pure black that I'm blending in as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. So I'm fairly happy with actually how it turned out, especially for a demo like this, to get it to kind of work. I'm pretty pleased with. But yeah, so that's it for today's session. I'll write out all the materials. I did mention them as we were going, but I'll write the materials in the description. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. I'll also put up my reference image if you want to have a go at your own. Yeah, and any questions you can pop in the comments as well. So yeah, that's it for this week, and it's going to be a bit of a break before the next session because we're into Easter. But yeah, as always, you can subscribe to keep up to date with any new videos that we do, and you can also click the link through to see what kind of paid qualifications we offer as well. So yeah, that's it for this little mini session, well, long mini session, and I'll see you guys soon.